Hello, my name is Sabra Weather, and today I'll walk you through the 2014 Russian invasion of Crimea, which is a pivotal and important event in modern national security. Let's start off with some core facts and research of who, what, when, where, and why. The key actors here were Russia and Ukraine. Russia was under the leadership of President Vladimir Putin, and Ukraine had just shifted its government after President Yanukovych was ousted. What happened? Ukraine had just been annexed by Russia by the annexation of Crimea using its military, which followed a controversial referendum. When this took place between February and March of 2014, but the annexation wasn't fully formalized until March 18th, where this took place in the Crimean Peninsula, which is a strategic region in southern Ukraine. But why did this happen? Russia had multiple incentives. For one, its Black Sea Fleet was based in Sevastopol, Crimea, which had a sizable Russian population. And secondly, Ukraine had recently leaned westwards towards the EU. So what does this mean in a broader context? Russia used both its covert and overt military tactics that resulted in the illegal annexation of Crimea, but this led to larger consequences as it violated international law and posed a direct challenge to the authority and credibility of institutions like NATO and the US, but it also triggered a long-term instability in Eastern Europe, which led to conflict that would later erupt in 2022. From a US policy perspective, the National Security Council faced limited options in respondents as it responded with sanctions and diplomacy rather than the use of military force. This shows the challenges of using soft power tools to respond to hard power aggression. Now, moving on to the USG national security involvement. At this point, the United States government was under the leadership of President Barack Obama. President Obama's administration focused on a multilateral response. The U.S. led efforts to impose coordinated sanctions alongside allies like the EU, NATO, and also the G7. And the National Security Council played a central role in coordinating the response across U.S. government agencies like the Department of Defense, which supported NATO's position in Eastern Europe, the Department of State, which led diplomatic efforts, while the Treasury Department developed financial sanctions. However, despite this coordination, the response was largely reactive, which led to constraints in the use of military options against this nuclear-armed adversary. I chose to use SWOT for my structure analytical technique, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As for strengths, which is alliances, it increased alliances between nations and institutions, as seen in secondly, the unified international institutions, as that also increased. And it established sanctions, increased the use of legal tools. As for weaknesses, it showed gaps in the intelligence community, but it also showed the limitations of U.S. following the annexation in Crimea. Third, the interagency reactive response in using soft power rather than hard power, which led to the lack of deterrence. And also focusing on opportunities, it led to a support of Ukraine. It expanded the U.S. influence in Eastern Europe, but also increased multilateral action, which meant expansion for NATO as well. And as for threats, it led to the erosion of international norms, the risk of future escalation as seen in 2022, and also the distrust and interest in US. And secondly, and lastly, the risk of proxy wars. Now, focusing on the retrospect, so what does this matter for national security? First, Russia's invasion violated Ukraine's sovereignty and the post-World War II rules-based order that alone makes it a U.S. core interest. Second, the aggression threatened NATO allies, especially those near Russia's borders. Third, Russia's use of hybrid warfare like cyber attacks and disinformation led to exposure of dangerous gaps in the U.S. unpreparedness. Overall, it was partially successful as Crimea still remains under Russia's control. As for my sources, I chose to use sources like the Washington Post, AP News, BBC News, and NATO's topics and Daily Mail, as they are credible, but they also show a great context and also shows accurate timeline of cross-referenced, well-documented events. All these sources met credibility criteria set by the assignment, and also based on the combination of official records and scholarly analysis. I'm confident that my sources are not only reliable but are also appropriate for this project. Thank you.